9 times out of 10, the WWE usually gets it right with WrestleMania. It's one of the most impressive spectacles in the entire entertainment industry, let alone the wrestling world, and it's usually worth watching for the pure theatricality alone. But with almost 40 years of WrestleMania's worth of content, it hasn't always been loud pops and historic moments. There have been a ton of times when WrestleMania has left us either bored, repulsed, or squirming uncomfortably in our seats. Whether it's a botched segment, a bad promo, or literally committing murder in front of a million people, WrestleMania's rap sheet of cringe moments is as long as its memorable ones. From the early years right up to the modern era, here are the top 10 WrestleMania moments that WWE wants you to forget. Number 1, Hulk Hogan says the wrong name. Hulk Hogan is perhaps the most famous wrestler of all time, having carved out a name for himself in not just wrestling, but in pop culture as a whole. But these days, Hogan is known more for his controversial statements than being an 80s megastar, so there's no shortage of cringe moments in the Hulkster's career. However, nothing trumps the moment when he named the wrong stadium in front of 75,000 fans at WrestleMania. At WrestleMania 30, Hogan mistook the BMW Superdome in New Orleans for the Pontiac Silverdome in Michigan, resulting in deafening boos from the electric crowd on hand. Hogan ended up correcting himself, but that did not stop the boos from the crowd, but thankfully, The Rock and Stone Cold arrived to sort things out. A real cringe moment for the ages, brother. Number 2, Undertaker kills the Big Boss Man. 1999 was one of the WWE's biggest and best years, so it's odd that that year's Mania, WrestleMania 15, sucked so bad. The show was rife with hyperactive Russo booking, including Chyna's turning face, then heel again within an hour, and Bart Gunn getting knocked out by a professional boxer in about 3 seconds. There were plenty of memorable for the wrong reasons moments, but one particular incident left the audience scratching their heads was the literal murder of the Big Boss Man. At the time, Vince McMahon's corporation were feuding with the Undertaker's Ministry of Darkness, resulting in a match between the Undertaker and the Big Boss Man inside the cell at WrestleMania 15. After the Undertaker tombstoned Big Boss Man for the win, he signaled to the rafters where the Brood, Edge, Christian, and Gangrel descended and landed on top of the cage. And here's where it gets weird, because they actually ended up feeding a noose through the top of the cell down to Taker, who then proceeded to hang the Boss Man by the neck as the cage rose back up to the heavens. We then got to see Big Boss Man's body spasm and go limp as though he was literally choking to death. Cue Michael Cole asking the audience, could this be symbolic? The audience weren't quite sure whether Boss Man was supposed to be dead or unconscious, but hanging victims usually don't tend to survive the ordeal, but luckily Boss Man was alive and well the very next night on Raw. Number 3, the shampoo commercial feud. WrestleMania tends to be the spotlight where the biggest rivalries come to a head. Hogan and Warrior, Austin and Rock, Undertaker and Shawn Michaels, and these feuds have all included classic elements that make for great storylines. Betrayal, obsession, jealousy, the hunt for glory even. However, there is one forgotten story that took place at WrestleMania over a literal shampoo commercial. The backstory was that in 2002, a Japanese hair product company were looking for a WWE superstar to endorse their product, and for some reason, Booker T really wanted that gig. He jumped through hoops to get it, resulting in some awkward, mildly racist backstage segments as Booker familiarized himself with Japanese culture. But Booker was shocked to learn that the endorsement deal eventually went to Edge, as the executives at Yakimoshi Shampoo were enthralled with Edge's golden lock. This set the stage for Booker T versus Edge at WrestleMania, and while the match was pretty solid, fans couldn't quite overlook the fact that it was only happening because Booker T was upset that he didn't land a foreign hair commercial. There weren't any stakes to the match either. It wasn't even like the winner got to star in the commercial. It was just a regular singles match that saw Edge victorious. Number 4, Big Show wins the IC title and nobody cares. WrestleMania is the #1 platform for big title changes. Everyone remembers Seth Rollins' heist of the century, everybody remembers Kofi Mania, but you'll struggle to find anyone who remembers the Big Show winning the Intercontinental title from Cody Rhodes at WrestleMania 28. In the build-up to the match, Cody, who was the current Intercontinental champ at the time, has been taunting Big Show about all of his embarrassing WrestleMania moments. And this, of course, led to a match on the greatest stage of them all for Cody's Intercontinental Championship. And after a relatively short and forgettable match, the WWE's most friendly giant actually came out on top. Big Show tried to sell the moment, including staring lovingly at the title with tears in his eyes, and this would have worked well for a scrappy underdog story, but Big Show was literally the biggest person on the entire roster. He was a a 4-time world champion and one of the most accomplished wrestlers at the time, and there he was crying like a baby because he achieved his lifelong dream of owning a mid-card title. Even 11-year-old me, who was actually in attendance that night, could tell you that the cringe was very strong with this one. Number 5, Brock Lesnar nearly dies. Brock Lesnar nearly dies. This one is a different kind of cringe. Fans rewatch this one through cracks in their fingertips, not because it's awkward, but because Brock Lesnar was a few inches away from actually breaking his neck altogether. Everyone knows that Lesnar is a genetic freak, and not only is he ridiculously strong, but he's got the kind of agility you don't usually see from a 6'3", 270-pound monster. And while he rarely delivers any kind of high-flying maneuvers these days, he used to incorporate the shooting star press as part of his repertoire back in his developmental days at OVW, and he always did it absolutely flawlessly. In the main event of WrestleMania 19, Lesnar took on Kurt Angle for the WWE Championship. And given the high-stakes platform, Lesnar decided to bust out the shooting star press for the first time since he joined the main roster, but it didn't go quite as smoothly as he planned. Lesnar didn't get the full rotation and ended up taking the brunt of the impact on his face. Definitely one of the most cringe and dangerous looking botches I've seen in a wrestling match to this day still, and even Brock years later has said that he probably shouldn't have tried to go for that spot. Number 6, Molly Holly goes bald. WrestleMania has a weird way of parting people with their hair. To date, 3 people have lost their hair at WrestleMania, those being Vince McMahon, Aiden English, and as we'll see in this entry, Molly Holly. At WrestleMania 20, the women's division in WWE was probably at an all-time low, and there were 2 women's matches on the card, one of which was a Playboy evening gown match designed to advertise an upcoming Playboy edition featuring WWE divas, which thankfully lasted less than 3 minutes, but the other match saw Victoria face Molly Holly in a somewhat pointless hair versus title match. Molly Holly lost the match, and so Victoria forced Molly into some kind of BDSM chair and scalped her while a confused barber awkwardly looked on. Complete with high-pitched screams and a traumatized victim, the whole thing played out like a scene from a Saw film. But with that said, we have to respect Molly Holly for committing to this entire ordeal. She even stuck with the bald look for a while afterwards, and it actually kind of looked badass. Number 7, Katy Perry sings The Undertaker. Okay, so this one isn't entirely WWE's fault, but it is cringeworthy nonetheless. When we think of the best entrance themes in wrestling history, The Undertaker has to be somewhere near the top. From his iconic gong to Limp Bizkit to Kid Rock, Taker has had some of the best themes of all time. At WrestleMania 27, Undertaker even came out to the ring to Johnny Cash's haunted ballad, Ain't No Grave. A couple months after Mania 27, NBC aired a special that highlighted certain parts of the show. This included Taker's entrance, but rather than fork out for the rights for the Johnny Cash track, NBC dubbed it over with a different song. American Badass, Rollin', no. NBC used E.T. by Katy Perry. We can kind of see the connection, giving the Taker's an undead wizard, but it's still surreal to hear a pop track over Undertaker's legendary entrance. Number 8, Michael Cole versus Jerry Lawler. There's a good argument for WrestleMania 27 being the worst WrestleMania of all time, and it wasn't that the matches were bad, it's just that they were so lifeless that they might as well not have happened at all. Much like the whole WWE around this era, WrestleMania 27 was completely forgettable, and even brief appearances from The Rock and Stone Cold couldn't save this mess. This is further proven by the fact that the most interesting match on the card was between 2 commentators. And it was around this time that Michael Cole had this bizarre heel phase too. For months, he'd just been a snarky guy, shitting on the product and coming across even more insufferable than usual. Eventually, Jerry Lawler decided he'd had enough of Michael Cole and challenged him to a Mania match. On paper, this match doesn't sound too bad. It's just a fun gimmicky angle that had never been done before, and if the match had been a squash, it would have been fine. But clocking in at an exhausting 24 minutes and packed with bad wrestling, a dead crowd, and Michael Cole's stupid outfit, it really just showcased how awful this era was. And worst of all, Cole ended up beating Jerry Lawler in the match. Number 9, Bret Hart versus Vince McMahon. Say what you will about Vince McMahon, but one thing's for sure is that he's always been happy to embarrass himself for our entertainment, and his WrestleMania 26 match against Bret Hart was no exception. If this match had taken place in the late 90s, it would have been incredible, but it didn't. It happened in 2010, and it involved a post-stroke Bret Hart fighting a 60-year-old non-wrestler, and it was as awkward and clunky as you'd imagine. Everyone knows the history between Bret and Vince, so this match was really just an attempt to capitalize on their their real life drama. The only problem was that the issue came to a head 13 years before, so there really wasn't much tension going into this match at all. It was also a lumberjack match for some reason, with Vince bringing in the entire Hart family and acting like they hated Bret as much as he did, although it was obvious to everyone that they were going to turn on him in the end. Worse still, the match lasted 15 whole minutes, and it culminated with Bret beating the hell out of Vince with a steel chair and making him tap to the sharpshooter. And although the ending being correct, it was still just an awful, pointless match that made us miss Bret Hart's glory days even more than we already did. And number 10, the DX Band versus the crowd. Now, this could very well be the worst moment in WrestleMania history because it's an all-out cringe assault on the senses. Everyone is familiar with the iconic DX theme, and at WrestleMania 14, someone thought it would be a good idea to invite the singer from the nameless DX Band to serenade the audience with America the Beautiful. But this was 1998, the height of the Attitude Era. Nu metal was the hottest thing. Rage Against the Machine were still good. Therefore, Chris Warren, the singer from the DX Band, decided to put an alternative spin on his rendition of this classic piece. It involved heavy riffs, lots of jumping around, and cringy nu metal vocals that could have definitely benefited from auto-tune. And despite the high energy of the performance, the crowd booed the hell out of it, loud enough to actually drown out the instruments. It culminated with Chris Warren screaming America over and over again in what might be the most transparent attempt to get a crowd on someone's side in wrestling history. And the performance was so bad that it's actually one of the few WrestleMania segments that have been fully edited out of the WWE network. So there's my list. If you have any moments that you think would fit into this category, go ahead and count them down below, and maybe I'll have to make a part 2. That being said though, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to go ahead, leave a like, and subscribe to not miss future content. Thank you so much for watching.